Have you ever wondered what brainwave entrainment is? And more importantly, how it can enhance your life? I'm Carol Talbot, the creator and founder of the Possibility Hub, and in this episode, I'm in conversation with Morry Zelcovich, a Brainwave Entrainment Engineer on a mission to help others improve the quality of their lives using the incredible brainwave entrainment programs and technology he's created. Hello, Morry, and welcome to the Possibility Hub. I'm really excited about our conversation because I heard you talking on the Brain Summit just a few weeks ago, reached out to you, and you very quickly and swiftly and efficiently got back to me. So you're a brainwave entrainment engineer. So I feel that's a great place to start because some people will know about brainwave cycles, and some people won't. So we can explain that. And also some people will know about entrainment, and there's a lot of people who won't. So let's start by looking at how brainwave entrainment engineer all comes together.
Sure. Well, thank you very much, Carol, for having me. First of all, I really appreciate it. And I appreciate all of you who are watching this as a podcast somewhere in the world. So brainwaves, they're everything. Your brain is literally the CPU of your life. So what that means is that if you don't get stimulated in some fashion, and that doesn't create a response by your brain waves, then you don't know what happened. You don't acknowledge it was there. You could literally have a baseball hit you in the head. And if your brain doesn't produce a response to that, you won't know you were hit in the head. It's that straightforward. What happens is, depending on the different frequencies, because our brains are made up of billions of cells, and those cells are called neurons. And the way a neuron works is it pulses an electric frequency. Now, when I say pulsing, it's not like a heart beating or like a lung inflating and deflating. It's how many times a second it produces a minute electric impulse. And depending on the region of the brain and how many pulses it makes per second, that kind of dictates the kind of chemistry the brain produces, things like neurotransmitters, endorphins, and hormones. And much like a recipe, so when a chef creates a recipe, it tastes really, really good, or it tastes really, really badly. If it tastes really, really good, then your life tastes good. Your life is happy. Your life is, well-rounded. If, however, you're not creating good chemistry and you create a kind of a crappy soup, then your life tastes poorly. It tastes badly. And it all comes down to neurochemistry. And that chemistry is created a number of ways. It can be created by, drugs, by alcohol, by other types of stimulation. But the best way to produce it is simply with your thoughts. If someone puts on what's called an electroencephalogram, it's basically, you'll see these pictures of people with a lot of probes on their head. That measures the brainwave activity of whoever's wearing it, at least on the surface of their brain. And often, if you're watching a display live, you can go to YouTube and type in EEG, then you'll actually see different colors lighting up. And the colors don't really mean anything except some random choice of, how many times a second a neuron is firing. And again, that denotes the state. So most of us have heard of alpha, beta, theta, gamma, delta. But we don't really know what that means. So now you're going to know what it means. It simply means the neuron is pulsing at a certain rate. So in alpha, it might be pulsing at 10 hertz or 10 times on and off a second. If it's in delta, it might be 2 times a second that it pulses. If it's in gamma, it might be 40. Beta might be 28. I mean, there's ranges. I'm giving you rough estimates here. And theta might be around 7. So that will dictate the kind of chemistry your brain creates. Why the chemistry is really important, I mean, there's multiple reasons, but for your experience, the reason why it's important is that dictates how you feel. So if you're happy, if you're sad, if you're excited, if you're bored, or anything in between, or any other kind of emotion or response, any kind of feeling you have, that won't happen without chemistry. So if you're not feeling well, if you don't have good chemistry, you're not going to experience your life all that well. Once your chemistry is balanced, that's when you start noticing differences. Brainwave entrainment uses a process called entrainment, where we use sound primarily, or at least I use sound primarily, but I also use visual stimulation. Pulsed beats would be the sound like ba, 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 to actually cause a response in the brain called the frequency following response. And that's the same thing that happens to you when you listen to music and you're just bopping your head to the music or tapping your toes mindlessly. You're not trying to do it. You don't even know you're doing it. It just happens. That is a form of entrainment. What I do is I create these specialized tones that are specially sculpted and positioned so that your brain responds by following those frequencies, kind of like a monkey see, monkey do, much in the way your feet are tapping to the music. Now your neurons are pulsing to my sounds. And why that's important is it allows your brain the ability to actually respond to those beats, go into what's called a dominant brainwave state, which allows you to produce natural neurotransmitters, endorphins, and hormones, which allows you to feel better and feel more normal. If we go back in time, I know this is a rather long answer, but if we were to go back in time to our cave dwelling days, what happened was it's reasonable to assume that we had longer periods of dominant brainwave patterns. We weren't worried about death. We weren't worried about life. We weren't worried about taxes. We weren't worried about war. We weren't worried about anything, really. We didn't have the intellect to worry about these things. We didn't have the societal processes set up that initiated all these concerns and worries. As a matter of fact, Carol, if you and I were walking side by side and I were to drop dead, you probably would go, huh, and just keep walking. There'd be nothing. Well, that's how it would be, because we didn't have the societal setup that made us concerned about other people and these things. Life was very much in the moment, and when life left, we moved on. It was that simple. At least it's reasonable to assume from the fossil record and everything that that's what happened. Now, fast forward to modern day, where we have distractions like this everywhere, and we have the fear of disease and the fear of this and the fear of war and taxes, and you pay your taxes this year and then next day you're worried about how you're going to pay them next year, and all of these different things going on. We don't have any kind of elongated state where we're in a dominant frequency. So again, if you go to YouTube and you go to a video, you'll see the lights lighting up all these different colors every half second or so, which means we're not producing the same quantities of natural brain chemistry, which would be reasonable to assume that we're not getting the chemistry we need. Yes, we've evolved over the millennia. There's no question we have, but we still have two nostrils. We still have two eyes, two ears, and a mouth. Our brains aren't that different from how they were way back when. At least it's reasonable to assume they're not. If that's the case, then it's reasonable to also assume that we're not getting the chemistry that they were designed to get. Is it any wonder we're depressed? Is it any wonder we're sick? Is it any wonder we have fear? Is it any wonder we don't live our lives the best that they could be lived? Not really. Imagine back then we were driving cars. So you can assume the car had fully inflated tires, all the fluids were full, gasoline was clean burning, or even electric, right? Everything was much better because we didn't have all these worries and concerns. We were attacked by something, we went into flight or fight. As soon as the fear disappeared because the threat was gone, we'd go back to normal. Now that doesn't happen. Now we're driving cars with underinflated tires, all our fluid levels are low, and the gas is smelly and disgusting, and it burns badly and causes us all kinds of breathing problems. So that would be a way of equating it with what's happening today. Brainwave entrainment, though, allows the brain to go back into these natural states. It's not supernatural. It doesn't give you powers beyond those of mortal men or women or children or animals. It simply brings you back to nature. And it's no wonder why people who use brainwave entrainment regularly seem to have benefits and aren't as likely to be on all these medicines and all these other things that are going on in other people's lives that seem normal and natural today, but really aren't.
So does that link back to the fact that, say, the normal waking state for most people would be beta, when they're looking at their phone and rushing here, there, and everywhere, and that's linked to the sympathetic nervous system? Whereas when you drop into alpha, then you're hardwired to the parasympathetic nervous system. So, you don't have that same response and reaction. Is this what we're talking about?
You may not like me after this answer. Okay. When you're in, there's no such thing as being in alpha or being in beta or being in theta or being in delta. When you sleep, you go through every state. It's in as dominant. Okay. Uh, when I'm awake now, I'm probably more in delta than I am in anything else from the last brain scans I had. Nobody is exclusively in one brain state. And I just love it when so-called experts say, oh, yes, I'm in theta now. What do they mean? Like, that should be the first question to see if they truly understand what's going on. First of all, I doubt anyone can tell by how they feel whether they're in theta or alpha. Maybe some super skilled, Buddhist monk or something might be able to. But the average human being, even scientists, I doubt they could tell you what state they're in unless they've been, using EEGs for decades and they've been able to relate a certain feeling to a certain brain state. But we don't have we might have dominant brain states for a second or two here or there. But even when you're sleeping, you still have gamma and beta brainwaves pulsing away in your head. They're just not dominant usually. So, once again, you're, stimulating one system, another system. Usually all systems are being stimulated at the same time. It's just which one might be stimulated a little bit more at that particular moment in time. When people do studies on brainwave activity, they normally average out the results because every second could have massive differences. So it's really a misnomer. It's a misunderstanding. Even the conscious and unconscious and subconscious minds, it just blows me away how many people think we have three minds, and then one is at odds with another mind. It's simply science's way of telling people, look, here's a group of actions that the brain can do. Here's another group. Here's another group. As an example, what am I doing? I'm waving to you with my left hand, right? Now I'm pointing at you with my left hand. Now I'm making a fist at you with my left hand. Did I just show you three different hands? Of course not. I showed you one hand that can do three different things. I mean, it can do a lot more than that, but I showed you three different things the one hand can do. Well, the brain is the brain. The mind is the mind. It has a million different facets. And it's just, originally when the unconscious and subconscious and consciousness were, coined, they weren't designed as separate issues. They were simply categories of different activity that the mind is capable of or has been identified as being capable of. Your consciousness is not at odds with your subconscious. That classic picture of the iceberg where you see 85% of it underwater and 15% above water, and the 15% is the consciousness, and then the subconscious or unconscious is below there. It's like, oh boy, every time I see that picture, I think, what a crock. Why do people just believe in things? Because everyone's been saying it for so long.
And maybe it can be used as a metaphor, except when it's taken to extremes, it creates separation rather than unity. Like your example of it wasn't three different hands that put three fingers up, pointed, and made a fist. It's one hand. So instead of saying there's the conscious, the unconscious, or you have alpha, beta, delta, theta, they're all part of the whole, really, rather than separating, and we have access to it all. And with entrainment, are you taking people, whereas we move around, as you said, even in sleep, we're moving around different states. So with entrainment, are you actually putting people into a particular, maybe a nicer word here, a particular rhythm that's more efficient in helping them get the results that they want?
That's well put, actually. It's a dominant rhythm rather than an exclusive rhythm. I don't think there's anyone on this planet who can get into a full theta where every neuron in their head is pulsing at the same rate. But yeah, it's, the brain knows what it needs to do, and it does it. And sometimes stress and anxiety and things like that get in the way of that.
Yes.
And what brainwave entrainment does is it allows the brain to relearn how to get to a dominant state and maintain it for more than a half a second. Because
It's
remember,
a
it's
bit
our brain
like,
states.
you go to
Sorry,
the
go ahead.
gym and, you practice, or if you want to get good at anything, you practice until it almost becomes automatic. So, to start having more of a dominant frequency, it's training it to do that. In other words, you're sending it to brain gym, or a different
Well, I wouldn't
brain
say
gym.
that because that's actually a product name.
It is, isn't it? With
So I would not say that actually, but a gym doesn't really, a gym trains muscles. What it really does is it brings your brain's ability back to nature, to where nature wants it to be. Nature, I mean, there's a reason why our brain states create chemistry, and different states in the brain create different chemistries. So when you mix it all together, it's like a recipe. So it's important to realize that the human brain is the best computer we're ever going to have. No matter how evolved we create, Apple or Samsung or whoever creates these microchips, they're still nothing like the human brain. They're not even close. I don't know if we live another million years as a society, if we'll even come close to what the human brain is capable of. But it's nature. So remember that our states create the chemistry. We've been designed, just like a car with its fluids, to operate at certain levels, to be normal and function properly. We're designed the same way. We're designed to function properly with the correct chemical balances and neurochemicals and all these things. If we don't get these proper balances, if we don't produce the chemistry we're supposed to and designed to produce, that's when we have problems. And that's why brainwave entrainment is so important in my mind, because it allows the brain to go back into these natural states where you're producing chemistry for more than a second.
So
You're
let's go
producing it
back
for
to what
5 minutes.
you just said was, if you can end up with problems if you haven't got sort of that dominant frequency and
Sure.
kind of like you've erred from the way that the brain should be operating. So let's go back to how you first got into this, because it's not a pretty picture by the sound of it.
At the time, it wasn't. Now I'm grateful for it. So I spent the first 40 years of my life wanting to be dead. I actually thought that I was the reincarnation of Adolf Hitler, because I couldn't believe how miserable I was, and I figured that there had to be a reason for it. Turned out, I think there was a reason for it, but it wasn't that I was Adolf Hitler in a previous life. I used to wake up every morning, and I used to cross my fingers, and I used to stand up on my bed because that's where the window was, and I'd open the drapes, and I would hope to see mushroom clouds. And I wanted to see the mushroom clouds because then I wouldn't have to live through another day. I did try ending my own life at least half a dozen times, but hey, I'm still here. Obviously, I didn't really want to die. I was depressed, severely depressed. I thought I wanted to die, but apparently I didn't, because it's pretty easy, again, to kill yourself if you want to. The fact that I couldn't kill myself made me realize that if I can't find a way to die, I have to find a way to live.
Exactly.
And that's what started me researching all these different things. I used to have an affirmation: life is a disease for which there is no cure but death.
Oof.
And I would repeat that over and over and over and over again, daily for decades. So when I realized, though, that this was all a drama I had created in myself, and I needed to understand what was happening, because I wasn't helping myself. I would read books, and that was the beginning of my research, reading books. And I'd kind of start feeling better reading the book, but as soon as I finished the book, it was back to normal again. I had thousands of voices in my head, suicidal thoughts and tendencies. I hated everyone in the world. I hated people who could smile. I hated people who could laugh, even though I faked smiling and laughing all the time too. And people thought I was kind of weird, but I don't think they realized I was depressed. I started studying and researching. Back in those days, they didn't have the internet. They didn't have, you know, they had libraries. So I don't know if any of the people out there know what a library is, but you can do a Google
I
search.
do.
Yeah, you can do a Google search and see what a library is. It's very primitive. They had something called paper and type and weird stuff. So I started researching, and I thought, well, where's my problem? Well, my problem's obviously up here. And I thought, what's up here? A brain. I was hoping there was a brain up there. I wasn't 100% positive, but I thought there might be. So I started reading medical journals, and I started reading, papers and research on quantum physics and perception and anything that I thought might have anything to do with why I felt the way I felt. I eventually came up with the whole chemistry idea, and that must have been my problem. And as I'm searching out different methodologies and modalities, and there were a lot, like I pretty much did everything I could find, nothing helped. Now, don't get me wrong here. I am not bad mouthing any of these modalities. And you'll notice I didn't mention what they were. Okay. Because I don't want anyone to be turned off of anything just because it didn't work for me. Doesn't mean it's not going to work for you.
Yes, and
So
I like that caveat because, what my mantra is also one size doesn't fit all. You have to find what's right for you.
yeah. And sometimes it's a series of things. And to be honest, even when even using these modalities and them quote unquote not working for me, they still taught me things that built into what is now known as the Morry method. Now, I didn't name it, by the way, but it was, that's what created it. It was my wholeness of experience that actually created what I do and how I do it. So I even tried brainwave entrainment, and it didn't help. And I thought, oh no, because I figured it was my last hope, because it's the last thing I found. But then it struck me, something hit me. In nature, at least my current understanding of nature, was simple. It was a case of everything changes in nature. Mountains, which seem like they're perpetual and eternal, they change, their shapes change, everything changes. Water changes. I used to have a full head of hair. I mean, everything changes. Okay. So exactly. So because everything changes, it struck me that brainwave entrainment hadn't changed. It was the same. It was always the same. And I thought, maybe I'm supposed to innovate this. Maybe the whole point of me going through all of this is to reinvent the wheel, so to speak. So I started reinventing it, and I created new techniques. When I started using those techniques, that's when I started coming out from my abyss. That's when I started seeing light at the end of the tunnel. And it wasn't a train coming at me. So that was really good. But once I realized that, I started creating things that were different in entrainment. And that is why what I do is so different. Not because I'm brilliant, not because I wanted to be unique, but because I had no choice. And it made a difference. It changed my life. I ended up sharing it with some people, friends of mine, because they noticed how I had friends, who knows. But, I guess I was a pretty good actor back then. But they noticed the change in me and asked what I was doing. So I shared this one recording with them. And then they got back and said, wow, this is amazing. I thought they were just being supportive, though. But that's what a depressed person does, right? They don't believe anything anyone tells them. They just think they're trying to be supportive, which was still nice. And then I started getting calls from people I don't know, because my friends had given it to some of their friends that I don't know. And when that happened, I realized I was onto something.
So
All those voices I had
what is
went
it
away.
specifically that's different with the Morry method, with what you developed that wasn't available out there at that time?
Well, most of what I do still isn't available anywhere else because they just don't know how to do it. So I'll give you a
Is that
couple.
the engineering part of it comes in?
That's the engineering and inventive part of it. So I'll give you a couple of examples. One of them is I do something called dual brainwave stimulation. So the way perception works is information in the left ear goes to the right hemisphere, information in the right ear goes to the left hemisphere.
The cross.
Yeah, they cross over. So I have two separate frequencies that are separate and distinct, but complementary. So you can't just pick any two frequencies and, get a result or get a good result. but I have complementary frequencies because I'm a neuroscientist, because I'm self-trained neuroscientist, so I don't believe anything's impossible. When you're trained by school, they tell you what you can do and what you can't do. I was trained by myself, so I had none of that action going on. I believe anything is possible. If I get a thought, that is the reason I had that thought.
So isn't that binaural? Isn't that what the term is when you have one frequency, one,
No,
and it creates a third? What's the
no.
difference?
Okay, that's actually a really good question, though. So a binaural frequency is, for instance, you have a pair of headphones. Let me just get rid of the wire here. So a pair of headphones.
Yes.
In this ear, you might be hearing, and in this ear, so you notice there was a subtle change,
Yes.
frequency, right? So that's a tone. Let's say the tone in my left ear was 100 hertz, and the tone in my right ear was 110 hertz. So the brain creates a ghost image,
Yes.
an audible ghost image that's blah, 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 10 times a second. When I'm talking dual frequency, it's blah, 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 completely different. So binaurals work on the change in the frequency. You can only have a single frequency created with a binaural beat at any moment in time. I can have two separate and distinct frequencies that actually entrain the hemispheres of the brain to separate and distinct frequencies. Now, I'm not bad-mouthing binaural beats. They create a nice state of disassociation, which can give you a break, which is very important. It can also help people with getting a experience of knowing if they have a neural problem between the hemispheres. In other words, if the hemispheres aren't communicating properly, you won't hear that pulse tone. But there's all kinds, it doesn't really do entrainment very well because the power of the beat is very subtle. It's kind of like would be the wave. The wave, what do I do, is more like this.
And
the other thing is
what I
women,
understand is so you're sending one beat to the right side of the brain and a completely different beat to the left side of the brain.
That's in my dual brainwave stimulation technique.
Great.
But I don't do that in everything.
Right.
But you see, the brain doesn't behave like that naturally anyway. So to entrain, like, hemispheric synchronization is a big buzzword where you get this hemisphere the same as this hemisphere. It's has benefits, certainly. But as far as your ability to live your life is concerned, that never happens. So it's actually better to have the brain get more variety than what is out there. So that's why when I tried the binaural beats, it didn't help me. And when I tried the other technologies that were out there, they didn't help me because they weren't pushing the envelope. I needed the envelope to be pushed. So that's just one of my techniques. I have another technique called Triliminals.
Yes, tell us.
So yeah, so with a triliminal, the way it works is it has three different scripts being spoken at the same time. So you get spoken words here in the left ear for the right hemisphere, in the right ear for the left hemisphere, and then in the center for both hemispheres. But you also have a specialized brainwave beat in the background, and that is in a special wavelength that initiates a process in the brain called the frequency following response, which elicits a reaction called LTP, long-term potentiation. It allows for the formation of memories. If that particular state does not exist in your mind, information goes in one ear and out the other. You don't remember. That's a common thing my mom used to tell me. Goes in one ear, Maury, and out the other all the time. So that's what happens. But when you have that state, it allows things to stick. Now, the way the triliminals are designed, because I'm speaking, I don't want to program you. I don't want to tell you what to do. So it's designed that with the brainwave beat and the way I present the words, that you will reinterpret everything in terms that make sense to you. If I say something that doesn't make sense to you, you will then just ignore it automatically. Consciously, you'll have a hard time understanding what I'm saying because I'm talking over myself. On top of that, I have a background shh kind of sound, which is over 600 frequencies specifically overlaid on top of each other. with the intention of blocking off extraneous noise from the outside so that it doesn't get in the way of the entrainment process. But also what it does is there's specific frequencies that what I call neurally locate, which means I locate specific frequencies throughout the brain to stimulate different regions. And that helps to make these a lot more powerful than they would normally be.
Wow.
So those are just two examples of exclusive things that I do that no one else does. I'm currently working on 40 other techniques / products that I'm designing my own tones as well, which has never been done before. Well, other than the people who designed isochronic and monaural tones, which are much more powerful than the binaural beats that most people know about. But in the current product lineup I have, there's probably more than a dozen techniques that no one else knows how to do. And I don't keep it a secret on purpose. If someone else wants to become creative and invent it, I'm happy for them. But, you know, I spent my life developing these things. I'm not just going to give them away to people.
Totally. So let's talk about the benefits and the results, because I also know the Brazilian university did a study on some of your products and some of, you know, what was of these frequencies. So tell us about the results from the study and how people can benefit from these.
Sure. So what happened was I was contacted by a captain in the Brazilian military. And I thought it was a con. I thought it was someone playing a trick on me until they gave me a phone number to call, which I didn't just call because it could have been any number in Brazil. I actually went to their information on the phone and they said, yeah, this is the Brazilian Military Academy. So, okay, I knew it was for real. They asked me if they could do a study because what had happened was one of their that captain I was telling you about, he found my work on a pirated website. So someone had taken my website, translated it into the language, right? Portuguese. Then what they did was they took out all the English spoken word recordings. They even used my picture and my name though. So this captain bought it from this Brazilian site. He loved it. He loved the effects he was getting, and he thought this could really benefit the military there. So they contacted me. We got in touch with Mato Grosso University in Brazil, and we came up with a methodology to do a study. That was it. That was all the influence I had over it. After that, there was nothing. The only bit was, yeah, you can do it, but just give me the results afterwards. So they ended up using it on their military police cadets, who, by the way, work while they train. So they're actually out in the public and they're dealing with the police in Brazil do not have a great, you know, rapport, if you will, with the people of Brazil. But they found that the people, you know, the students were sleeping better, scoring better on their tests, doing much better with the public, and able to do all of their duties as well as the education much more effectively than the control group.
It's nice to have that reinforcement with a study like that of what
Sure.
you've created. And I know when you're looking at your website, you know, there's products for positivity, confidence, you know, to reduce stress. There's also abundance. And I know you've also been featured in a book about Alzheimer's. Is that correct?
Well, I wasn't. One of my recordings was Dr.
Yes.
Dale. Well, I don't want to take a
that.
bow if I don't deserve it. So basically, Dr. Dale Bredesen wrote a book a few years ago. He's written a few books since then called The End of Alzheimer's. And he's an Alzheimer's researcher and doctor. And he's come up with a protocol called Recode and something new called Precode now, which is pre-Alzheimer's, but that has been shown to be able to help people with Alzheimer's disease. As far as even reversing and halting it in a number of cases. And he has studies to back him up. When he was developing the Recode, he came across a website of mine that had been sitting for like 10 years gathering cyber dust on the internet, because I could never get anyone to pay attention to me because who am I? I'm self-trained scientist. I'm not like university trained. I wasn't trained at Harvard or anything like that. So what happened was he found the website and he liked the recording specifically called Neural Agility, which is part of my Revitamind system. And that recording, he said, was helping people to rewire their brains, and it was helping them with sleep and anxiety and stress, which you can imagine with Alzheimer's is a big component. And often stress and anxiety make things much worse. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of people who think they have Alzheimer's and they're just overstressed and over anxious. And that causes, mental issues as well. So all of a sudden I started getting sales from the website. I didn't do anything. I'm wondering, where am I getting these sales from? Until a woman asked for a refund. And I said, okay, sure, I'm happy to refund you, but can you tell me how you heard of me? Yeah, Neural Agility was in the book, The End of Alzheimer's, and I did a Google search for it. And it turned out that they were actually giving away the recording, and they didn't really have any rights to. I never gave them permission to do that. So when I called them, we worked out an arrangement because they didn't know. Someone had told them they could do it. They could give it away. And so it wasn't them doing anything wrong. They just were under the misrepresentation that someone else was me, and it wasn't. So we ended up coming to an arrangement. Now there's clinicians and doctors all over North America and Europe who are starting to suggest the use of this system to help them in their protocol with Alzheimer's disease. So I actually have doctors and clinicians now literally not prescribing, because it's not covered by medicine and it's certainly not a pill, but it's basically a self-refilling prescription for mental health and mental happiness. And that's the story with Dr. Bredesen. So I strongly suggest, if you or anyone out there knows of someone who has Alzheimer's or has been diagnosed with the gene, get the book, The End of Alzheimer's. Specifically, chapter 3, I believe, is called How to Get Alzheimer's. You'd be amazed all the things you're doing that might be helping you along that path. And if you stop doing them, see, that's the funny thing about our society and about the way we work. It's always about taking something to stop something, or to halt something, or to cure something. In my opinion, and I'm not a doctor, but this is strictly my opinion, I think a lot of what could cure you and help you, and again, just my opinion, a layperson's opinion, is to stop doing certain things as opposed to having to take things.
Yes.
That's my belief anyway. By the way, I also don't believe in truth or fact anymore. And
I guess
I
that
saw
comes back to the fact that we're all individuals. And as we said earlier, one size doesn't fit all.
Well, that's part of it, but also fact. When I believed in truth or fact as a scientist, that stopped me from thinking about it. Because if it's the truth or the fact, there's no room for thought anymore, because it's a fact. I then started looking back in time, and things that were facts 100 years ago aren't facts now. Things that were facts 1,000 years ago aren't facts now. Everything is different now. And if that changes, chances are everything we think are facts now, in 100 years, they won't be facts either. So I choose to believe in current understanding. That keeps my mind open and allows me to alter my thought processes and what I do.
I love that model. And I think we're in a time where a lot needs to be challenged. When you think about from the moment that you're born, you're given a name, sent to school, taught a history, who created that history. And so we don't question. And we're also taught not to question. So I think you're very wise there to leave the door open. And, I feel that we're living in a time to challenge what we were told and what we were taught, that it's not fact necessarily, and that there's a new path, a new way. So as we draw to the close, I want to just go back to the Maury method, that you've developed, and talk about the type of person who might consider the Maury method, what might be going on in their life that they think, this could be just for me.
That's an interesting question. So I have currently 23 products that have been released. I have a series of that range from everything from, like I said, cognitive issues to sleep issues to stress and anxiety issues, PTSD, depression, all kinds of things like that. But there's a whole set of products that I'm coming out with that are all on peak performance. So, people always say, you have to narrow down, you have to be specific, you can't, you can't be just out there for everybody. I disagree. I think you can be there for everybody. I think when you're talking the brain is the CPU of your life. It's a central processing unit. If it doesn't pass through your brain, you don't know it's there. So my work is exclusively on the brain. And because my work is exclusively with the brain, it creates a circumstance where anything that passes through the brain is likely to be more efficient. So who is this for? It's for anyone who wants to feel a little bit better under any circumstance. It's for anyone who's experiencing anything they don't like to experience, because I want to clarify for people that pain is not a bad thing. Pain is a good thing. Discomfort is not a bad thing. Discomfort is not a good thing. It just is. It's there to tell you something is wrong. When you feel happy, it's telling you you're doing well. You're thinking and doing the right things. If you're unhappy, you're doing or thinking the wrong things. If you're in pain, there's a problem. Imagine if you broke your leg and you didn't have pain. You may not go see a doctor or to a hospital. You may not get it set. You may not be able to walk for the rest of your life. It might get infected and you might die. The pain just saved your life. The pain just saved your quality of life. Pain is there to help you. It's not there to hurt you.
And it sounds like the pain in your life brought you to a rather
Massive help.
Yeah,
Massive. Yeah.
it brought you to such a wonderful path and such a meaningful and purposeful path. I love, your description that the brain is the CPU of your brain, of your life.
Yeah.
I think that's a wonderful metaphor. So people can experience this because I know I did as well. There's a free download, and I'd love you to speak a little about this Alpha Flight, it's called. That people can download, because again, people may sort of link back to binaural beats, and I hope we've made it very clear that this is very, very different. So if you're going to sort of put the headphones on and think that you're going to be drifting off to beautiful music, it's a different kind of drift off. It's not getting into the rhythm.
Yeah, you're going to hear shh and ba 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 ba. That's what you hear. There's no birds, there's no cicadas, there's no pleasant stream in the background, there's no violins or harps. Not that there's a problem with any of those. Those are all very nice.
No,
they're wonderful.
It's not unpleasant. Alpha Flight is, maybe people think if it's got none of those, is it horrible to listen to? Not at all.
Yeah. So Dr. Doris Helge, years and years ago, when I first launched my work to the public, wrote a book called Joy on the Job, I believe. And in there, she talked about Alpha Flight because I had met her and she dealt with a group of people who travel a lot. They're high-powered executives, men and women, and they had a hard time with jet lag and with stress and anxiety, all the travel away from their family and all the running around. And she asked me to create a recording. So I created Alpha Flight, hence the name Flight, because it was primarily for people who flew a lot. And what it's designed to do is to calm the nervous system, calm you down, center you, and basically give you kind of relaxed energy. It's about a 15-minute recording. It's not very long. And again, it's just shh, ba, 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 ba. And it's designed to help you to just center yourself. And most people who use it love it. And that's the reason why I actually ended up creating a bonus recording that comes with some of my systems called Alpha Flight version 2, which is a 40-minute version of Alpha Flight, because people enjoyed it so much. So I do have various freebies that are available out there. Brainwave entrainment is relatively unknown, so people need to try it so they know whether it's for them or not. And like Carol has said so accurately, one size fits all. When it comes to brainwave entrainment, one size can fit all, but when it comes to individuals, one size definitely does not fit all. And that is why it's so wonderful that there are other modalities out there, hypnosis, NLP, meditation, hundreds of different things, probably thousands of different things, gong therapy, crystal bowls. I mean, everything that's out there has a purpose and has a person who absolutely will love the experience and benefit from the experience.
One more
So,
thing, one more
yeah,
thing, Maury. If people, when they go and download Alpha Flight, it's like taking a vitamin tablet. If you just take one, you may
yeah.
feel something, probably not. You need to, would you say people use it every day or twice a day for 10 days, a month? What would you recommend so that people really can make a considered judgment if this is for them?
I would say using it at least once a day. And the best way to listen, it's in the instructions when you find the recording, but it's basically you lay down, you close your eyes, you put on ordinary over-the-ear stereo headphones, and then you hit play, basically adjust the volume. One of the reasons why, a lot of people use earbuds and they'll think, oh, well, I have earbuds, I'll just use earbuds. Earbuds don't really work very well. You see, most of you probably think you've been listening to Carol and I this whole time. And I'd like to tell you, you haven't been. What you've been doing is, and if you're listening on a computer right now, I encourage you to, or your phone, I encourage you to put your hand over the speaker while I'm speaking right now, and you'll feel vibration. That's what you experience. You experience vibration. You do not experience sound. Sound is a perception. Sound is a construct by your mind. So the vibration goes in through the ear, all these little vibrations occur, and they get translated by the brain into what we call sound. So anyone listening to us speak right now would hear Carol's voice and hear my voice. But if we could record exactly what we're hearing, all of the recordings would be subtly different, because that's how the brain interprets it. Our brains will all interpret our voices slightly differently. That's one of the reasons why when you hear yourself speak on a recording, it's different from when you hear yourself speak and you're actually speaking live. It's the orientation. There's all kinds of differences in how the brain is interpreting that sound or that vibration. So understand that your brain is a lot more complex, but at the same time more simple than we think. It's important to know that sound doesn't exist. When you're using a little ear pod, even if it's an Apple or a Samsung or one of the really expensive ones, it's a very small vibrational surface. Even though your brain interprets music similarly and it sounds the same to you, it's not the perception of sound that entrains your brain. It is the amplitude or the strength of the vibration. So that's why we want to use headphones, which have a much, much, much larger vibratory surface. They will create more amplitude or more power in the signal, in the vibration, which will allow for a better entrainment process. I've had people who asked for their money back because it didn't do anything for them. I found out they were using earbuds, and when I suggested they go to a dollar store and spend $5 or $10 on a pair of headphones, they couldn't believe the difference. And I've tested this out myself too with very good headphones, or actually with average nothing headphones. They cost me, like the ones I just showed you, cost me $10. And earbuds that cost like $200-300. The earbuds don't do a thing, and yet it sounds the same to my ear.
I personally think the headphones are so much more comfortable. I don't like putting things in, so I've got my beautiful Bose headphones, and they're just so comfy, perfect for brainwave entrainment. Thank you, Maury, for sharing, for challenging us with, making us maybe think a little bit differently about the brain and about what we're listening to, and that it is possible to create incredible shifts with brainwave entrainment. And I really encourage everybody to go to your website. I'll be giving the details afterwards of how they can download that, and give it a go, and then look at some of the other products that you're offering. And thank you for sharing all your research. It's been extremely interesting and enlightening. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Carol, for having me, and thank you, everybody, for being out there. I hope I was able to give you a little understanding as to how and why your mind works the way it does. I find when we understand something, it takes away the unknown, it takes away the fear. And when the fear is gone, nothing is left except possibility. So thank you again.
And here we are on the Possibility Hub. Thank you.